What's up guys, how you doing today? It's Angry Roleplayer, and in this video I want to show you the difference between the Helltooth and the Arachyr Firebats build. I get a lot of questions, and when I posted my builds, and I recently posted the builds for the Helltooth, and I get so many questions like what is better, why Helltooth, why Arachyr, what's the difference, the sets are very close. And I also get a lot of questions like what gems should we use, what setup, what the bracers, what cube, and all of that. And I listed all these options in the builds, but I still get all these questions no matter what. So once and for all guys, we will see everything now, right now guys, right now. So basically, first thing that I wanted to talk about is the Arachyr and the Helltooth. What's the difference, guys? First thing that Arachyr does around 10% more damage than the Helltooth, and not because the set is stronger, but only because we have hex. The hex enemies take 50% additional more damage, and as you can see, this is a number that I do per second with the staff equipped, and with the 10 stacks of soul harvest, and with the sacred harvest in the cube, with all the passive and all the shit basically. So 221 billion damage per second with the Arachyr, with the basic rolls, just 20 fire here, no fire here. This is my basic setup, imported right from the game, nothing crazy. So 221 billion per second for the Arachyr set for me. Now switching to the Helltooth, guys. You see, that's 203 billion. That's around 10% less damage. 10% less damage with absolutely identical setup. Absolutely the same setup, just the same rolls. You just change Arachyr to the Helltooth, and it's absolutely becomes the same. So around 10% less damage. But here's a trick. Guys. Arachyr multiplies the damage by 1,500%, and Helltooth multiplies it by 1,400%. But we have different buffs and debuffs, and for example, the Helltooth 2-piece applies a 20% debuff. The enemies take 20% increased damage from our attacks for 10 seconds. Guys. So it's a buff and debuff. 6-piece gives us the buff, and the 2-piece gives a debuff. But here's the trick. I remove the hex here, and see, basically my DPS drops by around 10-15%, and Helltooth, it does a little more damage. So basically, when my enemies are not hexed, the Helltooth and the Arachyr with dice, they do absolutely the same amount of damage, and the Helltooth is actually a little stronger, like a couple percent stronger than the Arachyr. That's pretty interesting, because I'm pretty sure that no one did this calculations before. So basically, the hex enemies, they take about 10% more damage than the enemies that will play with the Helltooth. That's like this. And if the enemies are not hexed, they basically take absolutely the same amount of damage that with the Helltooth. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say, guys. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is the toughness difference. The difference in toughness between the Helltooth and the Arachyr. Now the toughness difference is pretty huge, guys. You see, that's my effective toughness. When I casted the hex, I get the damage reduction of the 4-piece, again 50% damage reduction, heal for 10%. And my toughness is 257 million. And with Helltooth, look here guys, look here. 321, that's like around 70 and around 17 million more toughness. That's the huge difference. And you know what, I don't really get where this comes from. I'm not entirely getting where it comes from. See, the difference in the 4-piece is just 10%. With the Helltooth we take 60% damage reduction, and with the Arachyr we just take 50% damage reduction. But the numbers we see here, they are much more different. You see, 300 millions, and here is just 250. So that's a lot of difference. That's like no, around 30%, I guess. 30%, even more. Around 30%. Yeah. That's around 25 to 30%, around 30% more. Around 40%. I don't entirely getting where the fuck this comes from. It looks like this also, you know, there's also a debuff. The Wall of Death gives also the debuff and reduces the damage dealt by the enemies by 25%. And if we add 25% and 10% difference with the 4-piece set, it looks like that's around the 33% we are talking about. So it looks like the calculator takes into consideration this debuff of the Wall of Death. But the Wall of Death only lasts for 3 seconds. It's not that much. So basically, if we compare, for example, the Hex and the communion with Spirit, so basically for the same amount of time, Arachyr does about 10% more damage, and the Helltooth setup with the Firebats, it just receive 35% less damage basically from the enemies. So overall the Arachyr does 10% more damage to the enemies, and the Helltooth is just survives 35% better within the same amount period of time. So it's around 35% more surviving. It's like a damage reduction debuff. So that's about it, guys. Now the interesting thing that I wanted to explain you is the difference between the two-hander and one-hander. Here you see the setup with the Sacred Harvester and the Vile Hive, and this was quite interesting because I've been checking the leaderboards a lot, and I found out that the top Helltooth clear, he used this. So he used the Sacred Harvester and the Vile Hive and also the Pin Enhancer. And Beskinator also did his 99 with the Sacred Harvester and the Vile Hive, and basically in the cube we have the staff and Pin Enhancer too. And then I started calculating things because I know I don't really take anything for granted when I see it on the web. And then I started calculating damage between the one-hander with the really nice Vile Hive. You see that's a really nice Vile Hive, and are all the Firebats here. And this is exactly the Sacred Harvester that I have in the game. It's GG Sacred Harvester with the area damage and all shit. And then I started calculating damage, and basically this is the damage that does one-hander with the Vile Hive. 174 billions per second. Then we switch to two-hander. See, I remove the hex here, and you see it's no, I should have the hex on it, right? There's hex here as well, right? So yeah, it's 221 billion, guys. So with two-hander, you see this is my two-hander. massive Firebats damage. It's exactly the stuff that I have in game. 10% damage. It doesn't have area damage, absolutely no area damage, and just the raw damage. So 221 and one-hander 174. So basically two-hander with the Firebat skill here rolled. It does around 25% more damage. The raw damage that it do every second. That's a lot, guys. That's a lot. Really, that's a lot of damage. And I don't really get why people started cubing the Salve of Chiroptera, guys. I don't really get this. When we cube the staff, we just have the Firebats taking fast and the cost removed, but we lose the skill damage, and 60% skill damage that cannot be compensated by the Sacred Harvester and the Wild Hive. Absolutely, and it's exactly what we see here. Of course, we can roll an area damage here on the Wild Hive, and we have area damage here. And I think that people started using this setup because they, kind of seen the possibility to roll 20% area damage here. But you know what? 20% area damage on top of all the area damage that you already have here, or a 25% of raw damage per second. It's so much better, the two-hander with the skill. It just hits so much harder, guys, so much harder. And if I roll 45 here, it still does so much damage than one-hander, so much. Basically, I don't understand why people starting to use one-hander. Can't get it. It's just pointless. And another thing that I want to discuss is the difference between the Taeguk and the Pain Enhancer. As you can see here, all these guys with the Helltooth, they have Pain Enhancer here, and this the best candidate even got ranked 25 Pain Enhancer, and this is pretty understandable because this damage that critical hits the bleed for damage, it's just inconsiderable. It's tiny amount of damage, and it is not multiplied by anything. So yeah, why not Taeguk instead of Pain Enhancer, for example, guys? Why not Taeguk? And I started calculating the Pain Enhancer version. This is exactly the same setup, but with the Pain Enhancer here. And guess what, guys? You need 12 stacks of Pain Enhancer to surpass the damage of 10 stacks of Taeguk. You see the damage here? 233 billion basically. And when I drop it just one stack, it's already 207 billion. And my staff with the 10 stacks of Taeguk, it just does 221 billion. It's much more, guys. It's much more. So basically, it's much easier to get Taeguk stacks first of all than the stacks of the Pain Enhancer. And even with the 8 stacks, of Taeguk, I still do more damage than with the 11 stacks of Pain Enhancer. And to get 11 stacks of Pain Enhancer, I need 11 monsters around me. You see, gain Blood Frenzy, granting a 3% increased attack speed for each bleeding enemy within 20 yards. So basically, Pain Enhancer just boosts us attack speed, and we reach the higher breakpoint with the higher frame. For example, with the 30 stacks, we get 6 frames and massive amount of damage. Massive. So yeah, basically the Pain Enhancer in a really insane stupid density. When we get 30 enemies bleeding, basically it out damages Taeguk by a huge amount, by around 30%. It out damages Taeguk. But if we have 12 enemies, it starts surpassing Taeguk. So 12 enemies around bleeding is where the pin enhancer started surpassing Taeguk, guys. This is where it becomes better. Lower than that, and Taeguk is better. This is it, guys. So basically, this is it. And keep in mind that pin enhancer works only within the 20-yard radius. So basically, this is exactly why pin enhancer is so incredibly strong in groups. So this is it, guys. I think I explained anything to you absolutely about the difference between the Helltooth and Arachyr. So let's summarize a bit. Arachyr does around 10% more damage, but Helltooth is 35% more damage reduction overall and more toughness. Not entirely the damage reduction, but Helltooth gives around 35% more toughness to you. That's why it's so much tougher, guys. As for the one-hander versus the two-hander, two-hander is always hits harder. You know why it hits harder? Because we don't really attack as a melee, and it's a channeling spell. In the past, when we used to run the Jade Harvester, back in the days when the Jade appeared, we ran with the Wrath of the Bone King, two-handed mace, and we used the Wormwood as well as a two-hander. And two-handers, they always hit harder for the nukes, for the dots, and for the channeling spells. And for melee attacks, when you actually melee attacking the enemies, one-hander, which is tied to attacks per second, it always surpasses the two-hander where you need to attack melee. But for channeling spells, for the casts, that bombs fall from the sky, from meteors or something like that, where the skill damage that scales with the weapon damage, two-hander, they are always stronger than one-hander. Always stronger, they always hit harder. So with the channeling spell, two-hander, it hits harder than the one-hander. And if you have the good stuff, always use the staff and cube Sacred Harvester in the cube, guys. Always cube Sacred Harvester. And as for the pin enhancer versus the Taeguk, pin enhancer starts to out damage Taeguk at 12 stacks. At 12 stacks, remember that. 12 bleeding enemies within 20 yards, and pin enhancer already does more damage, guys. More damage. So that's about it overall. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you soon. Subscribe to my channel, like my videos. Thank you very much for subscribing and for liking and following me on my videos. Thank you, guys. Thanks for watching.